me make a very important historical point. China today, in terms of its emergence as a great power, is exactly at the same point where United States was around the year 1900. Historically, how have emerging hegemons behaved? To be more specific, how did Washington act just over a century ago when Theodore Roosevelt led the US into what he was supremely confident would be an American century? In the decade that followed his arrival in Washington, D.C., the United States declared war on Spain, expelling it from the Western Hemisphere, and acquiring Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, threatened Germany and Britain with war unless they agreed to settle the dispute on American terms, supported an insurrection in Colombia to create a new country, Panama, in order to build a canal, and declared itself the policeman of the Western Hemisphere, asserting the right to intervene whenever and wherever it judged necessary, a right exercised 9 times in the 7 years of Theodore Roosevelt's presidency alone. Now, this is how America behaved as an emerging great power, according to Graham Allison. Let me tell you this. If China wants to take the wheel over all the islands in the South China Sea from Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, they can do it immediately in 24 hours. What is unusual for China is to not behave like Theodore Roosevelt. Right? And so it's a bit bizarre that Americans keep complaining about China's aggressive behavior, because China is the only country that actually has not fought a war in 40 years and has not fired a bullet in 30 years. So the Chinese have actually exercised tremendous military restraint. And by contrast, the Americans have been fighting a war almost every year. I think the issue is not whether China is democratic or non-democratic, because the most sensitive issue I bring up in my book is that the Western fears of China are not the result of rational calculations. The Western fears of China are the result of something that's emotional. And in the Western psyche for centuries, there's always been a fear of the yellow peril. If the West was driven by pure reason, they would see that actually China is not shaking up the world order. China is not sending armies to conquer other territories. And it actually is in Western interest to work with China rather than to try and bring down China. But the reason why the West is not reacting rationally to China is because of the fear of the yellow peril. Before it criticizes China, the West should ask itself, am I criticizing China rationally, or am I doing it emotionally because of my fear of the yellow peril? And to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only person who has tabled this question openly. Taiwan remains the last living symbol of China's failure to overcome the century of humiliation. And so every Chinese leader believes that it is his or her responsibility to complete the mission of removing all traces of the century of humiliation. And the only way to remove those traces of the century of humiliation is to bring Taiwan back into China. So that is the Chinese government is absolutely committed to that. As you know, very few governments maintain diplomatic relations with the government in Taiwan. And so the geopolitical space for Taiwan is shrinking. The geopolitical space for China is growing. And so if the Chinese are patient, eventually, Taiwan will fall like a ripe fruit, So if they can avoid having to use violent means, I think they will avoid doing so. So I don't foresee any immediate threat in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years of China taking violent action against Taiwan, as long as China keeps growing stronger year by year. So it's in China's interest to be patient. And since the Chinese always have a long time horizon, they can wait. 10, 15 years is nothing for a 4,000 year civilization.